Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. With the negotiations being delayed time after time between the Israeli authorities and the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas, we had a recent statement from the head of the International Arab and Muslim Relations in the political bureau of Hamas. His name is Khalil Al-Hayya. He had a couple of interviews to Arab media sources, and he spoke to them about the recent developments when it comes to the negotiations. He highlighted a couple of important things, including some new, well, not so new, but new to some people, or at least during this round of negotiations, proposals that they had from Hamas with regards to a long-term ceasefire and the potential of a two-state solution. Now, traditionally, Hamas promotes a one-state solution. They want to liberate all of Palestine. However, back in the early 90s, their spiritual leader, Ahmad Yassin, he offered the Israelis a very long-term hudna. Hudna means truce, or a very long-term ceasefire where they would have a state, not on all of the lands of Palestine, but for a long period of time without giving up the rights on all of the historical Palestine. Hamas made similar statements in previous years with regards to accepting a two-state solution, not a whole liberated Palestine, temporarily, with regards to the Palestinians obviously having a Palestinian state, sovereignty, independence, and right of return for the refugees. Now, obviously, with each of these topics, there's a lot of details involved, and Israel challenges many things when it comes to these details. However, in principle, it was stated by Hamas, and it's clearly on the table now again. We had a statement from Turkish officials, and particularly the Turkish foreign minister a couple of weeks ago, that Hamas will become a political organization if there is a solution. And now these statements are reiterated by Hamas, but there's obviously some sort of elaboration. I spoke about these statements from the Turkish officials previously and described how, if it were to be a case of Hamas only being a political organization in a liberated Palestinian state in the 1967 borders, these armed forces of Hamas, particularly the military wing of Hamas, and you need to consider the other resistance movements as well, would be formed into a national army. However, all of that would depend on the type of army, because again, when it comes to Israel, what they agreed on, or at least in some words, their idea was a demilitarized Palestinian state. Now they're not even asking about a Palestinian state, really, at least when it comes to statements. However, clearly there are talks in the background. Khalil Hayya repeated that Hamas will indeed become only a political organization if they were to have a Palestinian state on the 1967 borders consisting of Gaza and the West Bank, because the army, in his words, would be a fighting, powerful, resisting army. So, clearly, you would have a state controlled by the people, not like the Palestinian forces in the West Bank, for example, under full Israeli control. And he also stated that with all previous examples in history, when countries were liberated, their armed groups became a national army and they started to serve the country. Previously, they spoke about long-term truces. Now we have an official figure. Khalil Hayya said that we also offer to have a 5-year truce, 5-year ceasefire between the Palestinians and the Israelis if they had achieved a state on the 1967 borders. He also mentioned a couple of things that we already reiterated many times and that are evident from the negotiations, particularly from the Israeli side, which are primarily Israel delaying the negotiations for as much as possible, and the Israeli side being unreasonable. And clearly, from what we've seen in the past few months, Hamas is showing a lot of leniency when it comes to negotiations. However, they previously stated that Israel and the United States are taking it, but primarily the Israeli side, as a sign of weakness. So they're trying to get more and more out of them just because they're showing leniency. For example, this leniency was translated with the number of Israelis released per Palestinians released. The number of Palestinians was higher previously. We spoke about a number close to 100 or 100 or so for 5,000 Palestinians, even less than 100. However, Hamas had slight amendments when it comes to this, but they still have the core demands when it comes to the Palestinian people and their rights to getting aid in, people going back to the north, all of these things that are related to Gaza and rebuilding Gaza and not having any Israeli forces. He mentioned one important thing as well during these negotiations, that Israel wants 20% of Gaza. And his reasoning was any person with a sound mind wouldn't accept giving away lands for Israel for anything, really. So that's something completely unacceptable. Clearly, Hamas is refusing any sort of presence from Israeli forces in Gaza and are still sticking to the core demands to do with getting all of the Israeli troops out of Gaza, getting all of the aid in, rebuilding Gaza, and having temporary housing, obviously, and then later on releasing the prisoners. And with regards to the prisoners, he clearly said that we don't want to keep Israeli prisoners. We want to release all of them. However, we want to release them with a good deal. If we are not having a deal that is good for the Palestinian people, then there is no reason for us to release these prisoners, and the only delay is coming from Benjamin Netanyahu, and that is very evident, especially from the increasing voices within Israel ever since the beginning of this genocide, really criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that he has blood on his hands and he's the reason that these people are being killed, particularly with the level of prisoner deaths when it comes to Hamas, especially with the recent publishing of Al-Qassam brigades of an Israeli held in Gaza, who was blaming Netanyahu and who had his arm amputated. So these were the main things that I want to talk to you about in this video, and I will see you soon in the next video. Take care.